The chamber in the Tower of the Hand was cloaked in shadows, the air thick with betrayal. Ned Stark, Lord of Winterfell, stood at the window overlooking the Red Keep, the weight of Robert's death pressing heavily on his shoulders. His fingers clenched the parchment bearing Robert Baratheon's final will, naming him Protector of the realm, yet power in King's Landing cared little for ink and honor. Across from him stood Petyr Baelish, the ever-smirking master of coin, his grey-green eyes gleaming with quiet ambition. "You're outnumbered, my lord," Baelish said softly. "Renly wants the throne. Stannis has the blood claim. Cersei holds the children and the gold cloaks. You have a parchment." "I have honor," Ned replied. "Honor won't keep your daughters safe," Baelish said, voice dropping like a blade. "Not from Cersei, not from Joffrey, not from the game. You can't win unless you play it." Ned's instincts told him to turn away. Baelish was untrustworthy, slippery as a shadow. But his daughters were hostages, his allies were few, and Robert's realm was cracking. A cold realization crept through his chest. Honor had failed too many times before. "What do you suggest?" Ned asked, reluctantly. A slow smile curved Baelish's lips. "We back Joffrey, publicly. Keep him on the throne. For now, the gold cloaks will follow you if I command them. We remove Cersei quietly for her crimes. You act as regent. I keep the council in check. When the time is right, we announce. Joffrey's illegitimacy and you take control. Not for yourself, for stability." Ned said nothing for a long time. His thoughts turned to Jon Arryn's fate, to Lyanna's crypt, to Jon Snow, to Sansa and Arya, to the realm teetering on the edge of chaos. Then he gave a single nod. "Very well, but no bloodshed. I want Cersei arrested, not slain." Baelish's grin widened. "Of course, my lord. Discretion is the soul of power." The next morning, the court gathered in the throne room. Cersei sat to the side, regal in gold and green, her children arrayed like pawns. Grand Maester Pycelle looked concerned. Varys watched with unreadable calm. Lord Eddard Stark stepped forward, flanked by Baelish and the commander of the City Watch. The gold cloaks stood at attention more than usual, and more heavily armed. "I bring the words of our late King Robert," Ned began. "He held the will high, voice unwavering. He named me protector of the realm until his rightful heir comes of age. The crown must pass to Stannis Baratheon." Murmurs surged like a tide. Cersei rose, eyes blazing. "This is treason. My son is king." But before she could draw breath to call the guards, Baelish raised a hand, and the gold cloaks stepped between her and the Iron Throne. Her eyes widened in shock. "What is the meaning of this?" she hissed. "You are under arrest," Baelish said smoothly, "for the murder of Jon Arryn, conspiracy against the crown, and the concealment of your children's true parentage." Cersei lunged toward Joffrey, but she was seized by the guards. The boy king screamed, but no one listened. Even Pycelle faltered, unsure what side to stand on. Varys, ever the spider, simply folded his hands and nodded, as if this had been inevitable. That evening, Cersei Lannister was confined in the Black Cells. Jaime Lannister, still recovering from a skirmish with Stark men in the Riverlands, was declared a traitor in absentia. The small council was reshuffled. Renly fled the city, and Stannis had yet to respond to ravens. Baelish took control of the gold cloaks permanently. Ned Stark became the de facto ruler of Westeros in Joffrey's name. though it tasted like ash in his mouth. The realm bent to his authority for now. Yet as he sat in the Hand's tower, Baelish beside him, a darker question lingered in his mind. What price had he just agreed to pay? Little did he know Petyr. Baelish never played a game he did not plan to win. The Red Keep had never felt more uneasy. Cersei Lannister, once queen, now prisoner, lingered in the black cells, her fury growing like wildfire beneath the capital. Her absence created a vacuum, and into that space flowed whispers, ambitions, and sharpened blades. Ned Stark had done the unthinkable. He had outmaneuvered the lioness. Yet, as he sat in the small council chamber, signing decrees in Joffrey's name, he knew the realm would not stay quiet for long. Petyr Baelish, meanwhile, thrived. "My lord," he said one afternoon, placing a rolled parchment on Ned's desk, "a raven from Dragonstone. Stannis refuses to acknowledge Joffrey. He calls him a false king and demands the throne." Ned's jaw tightened, and Renly fled south. Baelish replied smoothly, "Word is, he's gathering support in Highgarden. The Tyrells like their power and their pageantry. He may crown himself next." The realm was fracturing faster than Ned could hold it together. Joffrey sat on the Iron Throne, but was no true king. Stannis had the claim, but not the love of men. Renly had charm and gold, but no legitimacy. And Ned had honor, and now a fragile alliance with the most dangerous man in King's Landing. In the following days, messengers rode across the kingdoms under Ned's command. He ordered the lords of the realm to stand down, to keep the peace, to await a great council to determine succession. But the lords smelled blood. Some bent the knee. Others, like Roose Bolton, the Freys, and Balon Greyjoy, waited to see which way the wind blew. In the small council, Baelish spoke in honeyed tones. "We must keep the throne stable. Joffrey remains the figurehead for now. But we guide him, you guide him." "You mean you manipulate him," Ned replied coldly. Baelish chuckled. "Semantics, my lord. I've already begun replacing the gold cloak captains with men loyal to us. Lord Janos Slynt has proven useful." That name made Ned's stomach churn. He realized now the web he had stepped into. The gold cloaks served Baelish. The treasury was empty, the crown in debt. With Cersei gone, Lannister gold no longer flowed. And yet Baelish seemed unconcerned. He always had another plan, in secret. Ned had Sansa and Arya sent away from the Capital One to Winterfell with Ser Roderick. The other disguised and hidden in the kitchens with Varys's help. If this alliance ever broke, his daughters would not suffer for it. But others were already suffering. A riot broke out near Flea Bottom. The people cried for bread, for stability. Some shouted that Joffrey was a bastard. Others begged for the city trembled beneath its own uncertainty. And then, one night, a servant was found dead outside the Tower of the Hand. Poisoned, her tongue cut out. A warning. She was one of Varys's. Baelish said, examining the body with disturbing calm. A spider's web, clipped, perhaps. Ned wasn't so sure. Someone was hunting in the dark. But was it Varys? Lannister loyalists? Or Baelish himself, trimming his own allies? Ned ordered the Red Keep tightened. No one in or out without his seal. Whispers of war came daily. Bannermen marching in the Stormlands, the Reach raising banners. The Vale remaining quiet, but the greatest threat came from within. That night, Varys appeared in Ned's chambers, robed and silent. "My lord," he said carefully, "there are 3 factions in this city, yours, Baelish's, and the shadows. You control the throne, but he controls the locks. How long until he turns them on you? Ned met the eunuch's eyes. If he betrays me, I'll face him. Varys nodded. I pray it's not too late when you do. But unknown to Ned, Baelish had already written to the heir to Lysa Arryn, his past lover and widow of Jon Arryn, her to declare for Joffrey and send troops to King's Landing. He painted it as Ned's wish. He had no intention of letting Ned Stark remain in power forever. The Mockingbird had played his part well, but winter had many long nights ahead. From the golden hills of Casterly Rock to the bloodied banks of the Trident, the Lannister name commanded fear and power. And now, for the first time in years, their pride had been wounded. Cersei Lannister, Queen Regent, was locked in the black cells of the Red Keep. Her son Joffrey sat on the Iron Throne as a puppet, and her brother Jaime remained in the Riverlands, cut off, furious, and surrounded. But the most dangerous Lannister of them all was now moving in the war tents. Of the Westerlands, Lord Tywin Lannister read the Raven's message in silence. Then he folded the parchment, placed it on the table, and spoke 5 cold words: summon every bannerman to war. Back in King's Landing, Ned Stark received the news by Raven. The Lannisters had raised their banners. Over 30,000 men marched under the Lion's banner. The Riverlands were burning. Lord Tywin was marching east. Jaime was rallying troops near the Golden Tooth, and none of them were coming to rescue. Cersei, they were coming for vengeance. They're baiting us, Baelish said, smirking over the map of West. If we move too soon, Tywin will strike the capital before reinforcements arrive. We can't sit behind walls while the Riverlands bleed, Ned snapped. Baelish raised an eyebrow. And yet, if you ride out, you leave the city to Joffrey. And me. That was the threat hidden beneath his smile. Ned was trapped. His sense of justice demanded he ride to defend the Tullis' wife's family. But the capital was held together by threads and secrets. We'll send Lord Beric and Seer Barristan, Ned said finally. A peace envoy. One last chance. But there would be no peace. Meanwhile, in the depths of the Red Keep, Cersei Lannister bided her time. Though her cell was damp and her pride bruised, she was not broken. She had endured worse, and more importantly, she still had allies. Her cousin Lancel had begun smuggling messages on her behalf. One, written in her careful hand, had already reached Tywin. Ned Stark has taken the boy. He rules in Robert's name. I am imprisoned. The wolf betrayed his word. Another message reached Seer Marin Trant, still loyal to the Lannister name. Quietly, he began recruiting among the remaining gold cloaks and knights who still held allegiance to the Queen Mother, and in the Tower of the Hand, Petyr Baelish received word from the Vale. Lysa Arryn had agreed to send men for the safety of little Robert, she wrote, and at your request, sweet Petyr. But Baelish's game was not yet complete. He needed one more piece to fall. He visited Joffrey one morning, finding the boy irritated and bored. My lord, Baelish said silkily, do you know what they whisper about you in the court? Joffrey narrowed his eyes. What? That you are not truly the king. That Lord Stark holds the real power. Joffrey scowled. I am the king. Then, show them, Baelish whispered. Take command. Summon the court. Sit the throne. Demand loyalty. And so, that very evening, Joffrey held a court session without Ned's approval. The throne room was packed. Lords, knights, and small folk all gathered as the boy king strutted to the Iron Throne. Ned arrived late, confused and wary. "I am the king," Joffrey shouted from the throne, "and I command that the traitors to the crown be punished." Name was never mentioned. Instead, Joffrey called out 3 members of the small council who had questioned his rule. Pycelle, confused and frightened, barely managed to kneel before being dragged away. Then came the moment of silence, and from this day forward, Joffrey declared, "I no longer need a protector of the realm." All eyes turned to Ned. Baelish stood silent. Ned stepped forward, speaking calmly. "This is not how law is done. The king's hand cannot be removed by decree. Robert's will still stands." But Joffrey slammed his hand on the armrest. The will. The gold cloaks hesitated. Baelish gave a slight nod, and suddenly, Ned Stark was surrounded. The throne room descended into chaos. Swords were drawn. Ned's guards moved forward, but the gold cloaks outnumbered them. Said Barristan, torn between loyalty and justice, stood frozen. Varys vanished before anyone noticed. Baelish stepped beside Ned and whispered coldly, "I told you not to trust me." Then, with a flick of his wrist, he signaled Janos Slynt. The Lord of Winterfell was seized again, but this time the charges were different. "Lord Eddard Stark," Joffrey proclaimed, "you are accused of treason, of plotting to usurp the throne, and of conspiring with my mother to poison the king." Baelish smiled. Cersei, down in her cell, smiled too, because the game was not over. It had just begun. Eddard Stark, once Warden of the North and Lord of Winterfell, now sat in the dank and fetid darkness of the black cells. His wrists bore iron manacles. His face, once stern and proud, had aged years in days. The betrayal stung worse than any sword, not just from the boy king, but from Petyr Baelish, the very man he had trusted in a moment of desperate compromise. He had played the Game of Thrones and lost. Outside his cell, the city was shifting. Whispers filled the streets. The wolf had been caged. The Queen Mother was free, and Joffrey now ruled with unchallenged authority because Baelish had planned every move. It began that same night. Joffrey summoned a midnight council in the Red Keep. Cersei was brought from her cell, now wearing crimson and gold once more. She said nothing as she entered, simply glanced at Baelish and nodded. She knew who had played her release into motion. "Lord Baelish," Joffrey said, trying to sound regal, "has saved the throne from traitors. I name him Lord Paramount of the Trident and Lord of Harrenhal." "Undeserved," Baelish said, with a mock bow, but graciously accepted. Varys, still ever present in the background, said nothing. Cersei turned her attention to Janos Slynt. "Raise the city defenses. Tywin will not march forever. We must hold the gates until his arrival." But Slynt, ever greedy, asked instead, "What of Stark? Shall we execute him?" Joffrey hesitated. He was hungry for power, but not entirely free of fear. Executing a Stark could ignite the North. "Let him confess first," Cersei said coldly. "Then we'll decide how merciful we feel." In the darkness, Ned received a visitor. It was not Baelish. It was not Varys. It was Sansa. Tear-streaked and frightened, she begged him to confess. "To ask for mercy. They'll spare you," she whispered. "If you just say the words." Ned said nothing for a long time. Then he cupped her cheek and nodded. "I'll say what I must," he murmured, "if it keeps you safe." The next morning, the great sept of Baelor stood packed. The bells tolled slowly, echoing through the capital like a funeral dirge. A platform had been erected before the crowd, and standing atop it was the boy king, flanked by Cersei and Baelish. Ned Stark was dragged forward, beard grown, face hollowed, but pride still burning in his grey eyes. Grand Maester Pycelle read the charges: treason, conspiracy, attempted usurpation. Then Joffrey turned to him. "Confess," he said, "and your life will be spared." Ned looked out over the crowd, the small folk, at the nobles, at Sansa, in the front row, and Arya, hidden in the crowd, thanks to Varys' arrangements, and he lied. "I am guilty of treason," he said, voice steady. "I tried to usurp the throne. Joffrey Baratheon is the one true king." A shocked silence rippled through the crowd. Then Joffrey smiled. "Take him to the wall," Cersei declared, rising. "Let him wear black for the rest of his days." But the smile on Joffrey's face darkened. "No," the boy said. "He betrayed my father. He must die." Cersei's eyes went wide. "Joffrey, I am the king," he screamed, and before anyone could stop him, he turned to Seer Ilyn Payne and gave the command, "Bring me his head." The crowd gasped. Even Baelish was taken aback. He had not planned for this. Ned's execution would provoke the North, destabilize his delicate web of control. But it was too late. Seer Ilyn stepped forward. Sansa screamed. Arya fought against the crowd, and as the sword came down, Petyr Baelish watched in silence, and for the first time realized he may have gone too far. That same night, ravens flew north to Robb Stark in Winterfell, to Stannis on Dragonstone, to the Vale, the Riverlands, and beyond. The wolf was dead, but war had just begun. The death of Ned Stark shook the Seven Kingdoms like an earthquake. One clean swing at Bella's sept had severed not just a man but the last fragile tie holding the realm together. From Winterfell to Dorne, from the Eyrie to Dragonstone, the lords of Westeros read the Raven's message and saw it for what it was, a declaration of war. The North remembered. Robb Stark, barely 15, stood in the great hall of Winterfell, fists clenched and heart burning. When Maester Lewyn finished reading the Raven's letter detailing his father's confession and execution, Robb said nothing. He did not weep. He did not shout. Instead, he turned to Theon Greyjoy and said, "Call the banners." Soon, horns sounded from Carhold to Deepwood Motte. The Umbers, the Boltons, the Mandalors all answered the Stark call. War was coming, and the dire wolf was ready in the Riverlands. Catelyn Stark received the news beside her ailing father, Hoster Tully. Her scream echoed through Riverrune's halls. It was grief laced with fury. Ned had trusted honor, and it had cost him everything. Her brother Edmure agreed to support Robb's march south. The Riverlands would rise with the North. Together, they planned to seize the strategic crossroads and cut off Lannister supply lines. Riverrun would become the rallying point for the rebellion. In Ballion's jaw, Titan's jaw tightened as he read the letter. He had already declared Joffrey a bastard, and Ned Stark's death confirmed his worst suspicions. "This is what comes from compromise," he growled to Davos Seaworth. "He should have crowned me." But it was not just fury that moved Hemmet, was opportunity. Stannis sent ravens declaring himself the one true king and demanded loyalty from all lords. With Melisandre beside him, he prepared to invoke the power of R'hllor to claim what he believed was rightfully his. Meanwhile, in King's Landing, the air had grown thick with tension. Ned's death had not brought peace. It had broken the illusion of control. Cersei looked down at her son Joffrey with cold calculation. The boy had defied her. ignored her command to spare Ned, that made him dangerous even to her. Baelish, watching from the shadows, was furious. Ned's death had ignited rebellion, not quelled it. His careful balance of influence had shattered. He confronted Cersei behind closed doors. "You promised he would live," he hissed. Cersei narrowed her eyes. "I never promised you anything. You gambled on a Stark. You lost. But I built this alliance, and now you'll fix it," she snapped, "before the North brings wolves to our door." In the streets, the small folk grew restless. Bread was scarce. Gold was running out. Whispers spread of rebellion, of Robb Stark's march, of Stannis' fire priests, of Renly Tyrell claiming kingship in Highgarden. Yes, Renly had declared himself king as well. With the Tyrells at his back and the Reach full of soldiers, he marched north, hoping to seize King's Landing before Stannis or Robb could. The realm had no king, it had four: Joffrey in the capital, Stannis in Dragonstone, Renly in Highgarden, and now Robb Stark, declared king in the north by his bannermen in a thunderous, ancient ceremony. The North would no longer kneel. Baelish knew the game was out of control. He called Varys to his chambers, pouring 2 glasses of Arbor gold. "We must strike a balance," Baelish said. "Chaos serves no one." Varys arched a brow. "You built the chaos, now you drown in it. I can fix this, if I had more power." Varys interrupted. "You have enough power to burn us all." And with that, the spider left the mockingbird to his thoughts, for the first time in years. Baelish felt something unfamiliar. Vulnerability. He had gambled with kings and wolves and queens, and the pieces were all off the board to the east. Arya Stark travelled disguised as a boy in the company of Yoran. She carried no titles, no protection, only a name and a sword needle. Her journey had begun, and in the north, Robb crossed the neck, his direwolf Grey Wind leading the charge. The war drums beat louder with each passing day. Ned Stark was dead, but his death had sparked a storm that no king could stop. The 7 kingdoms bled. Winterfell's banners flew southward like a tide of vengeance. From the Riverlands to the Westerlands, flames painted the horizon. Castles burned. Towns were pillaged. Alliances shattered and reformed like brittle ice. Ned Stark's execution, intended as a show of strength, had instead shattered the fragile illusion of peace and order. Westeros was no longer a kingdom, it was a graveyard for kings. In the capital, King's Landing, Joffrey Baratheon ruled from the Iron Throne with an iron whim. But behind the curtain, it was Cersei and Petyr Baelish who played the real game, each circling the other like lions in a pit of knives. Baelish, once the architect of shadowy influence, now found himself in a kingdom on fire. He had won, yes. Ned Stark had fallen. Baelish had his title, his gold, his castles, but power had come with a price. Instability. Renly Baratheon, handsome and beloved, marched with the full strength of House Tyrell. The southern lords called him king, not for his blood, but for his promise of peace. Petyr Baelish tried to send envoys subtle threats, sweeter offers, but Renly ignored them. He had Cialora's, he had Highgarden's coin, and he had no intention of bending the knee to a boy who beheaded a Stark. Stannis Baratheon, grim and unwavering, gathered his fleet at Dragonstone. With the Red Woman whispering in his ear, he sent forth a chilling declaration: the false kings shall fall, by fire and by sword. The Lord of Light has shown me. His letters burned through the realm. His followers grew, and in the shadows, Melisandre saw a different enemy than just the boy on the throne she saw Baelish, whose ambition distorted fate itself. She warned Stannis, "There is a man who feeds on chaos. He must be cast down, or all kings will burn." In the north, Robb Stark was no longer a boy. He was a king. At the Twins, he won the Frey's alliance with his charm and Catelyn's desperation. At the Whispering Wood, he captured Jaime Lannister in a brilliant stroke. At Riverrun, the Riverlords declared him king in the north, a title not heard since the days before Aegon's conquest. Baelish, watching the war unfold from behind a mask of calm, realized the wolf was rising. The Lannisters were cornered, and Renly were at each other's throats. Joffrey was impulsive. Cersei distrusted him. Varys had grown silent. He had to act, so he proposed what no one expected. Baelish summoned Catelyn Stark to King's Landing under the pretense of a parley. There, he offered a bold and twisted idea. Robb is winning battles, yes, but he will lose the war unless he allies with the throne. Catelyn's eyes burned. "The throne that murdered my husband." Baelish leaned in, unblinking. "And yet what better way to destroy your enemy than from the inside? Joffrey is a child, a weak king, a marriage alliance, perhaps Sansa to the throne, or Arya. You gain leverage, he gains legitimacy." Catelyn left without giving an answer, but the seed was planted as the war dragged on. Baelish's schemes became more desperate. He arranged assassinations of minor lords to fuel distrust between the Baratheon brothers. He redirected crown funds into mercenaries loyal only to him. He even approached Varys, asking if they might guide the kingdom together. Varys simply replied, "You mistake me for someone who plays to win, Lord Baelish. I play so the people might live." The spider turned and left, and Baelish knew he stood alone. The end came not with a battle but with a choice. Tywin Lannister, having crushed Robb's army at the Green Fork and taken Harrenhal, finally arrived at King's Landing. Cersei welcomed him as savior. Joffrey was relieved. Baelish, however, knew he was now surrounded by wolves in lion skins. He had overplayed his hand. He had no real army, no true allies, only titles and shadows. Cersei, seeing his weakness, struck first. She accused him of treason, of conspiring with Stannis, of misusing crown funds, of orchestrating Ned Stark's arrest for personal gain. The small council turned against him. Even Janos Slynt testified. In exchange for a new title, Baelish stood in the throne room. No longer smiling as he was dragged away by Lannister guards, he whispered, "I made this realm. Every war, every crown, every corpse, lead back to me." "And yet," Cersei replied, "no one will remember you." Petyr Baelish was executed in the dungeons of the Red Keep, not by sword, but by silence. His body was buried. Without ceremony, his name struck from the records. And so the man who fed chaos to gain the throne died in the kingdom he tried to control. The Iron Throne stood, stained in blood and secrets, but in the north the wolves howled louder than ever, and winter had finally come.